Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special Narativ Live tonight. We're going to be doing something we've never done before. We're going to be taking a look at a couple of depositions. These are depositions by two people who represented a part of the DOGE group, the group that Elon Musk brought to the government just over a year ago. Can you believe it's only been a year? This group was meant to cut $2 trillion in deficit. They didn't achieve anything like it. But now through these depositions, we're beginning to get our first real look at what was going on inside these government departments as DOGE workers went in there and started gutting federal budgets and removing grants, cutting people, cutting staff. It was a remarkable turn of events as DOGE descended on the executive branch. Thoughts as we listen to these depositions. We won't listen to them in full. We've just got the edited highlights. And we were very interested in what you have to say about the kinds of people that DOGE attracted and the way they did things. Tonight's deposition features two 28-year-olds. The two walked into the National Endowment for the Humanities in March 2025, a year ago. One was a college dropout who idolized Peter Thiel, and we know what that means. It means he doesn't support people going to college. He believes that people should just find their way through life on their own without any secondary education. One of them is a devotee of that thinking. The other was a private equity associate. He was a commerce degree graduate. He was a German minor. And he also didn't have a real idea of how government worked at all, although he had actually attended a university, so some knowledge about what the world was like. Neither of these two people had ever administered a grant. Neither had read a humanities proposal ever. Neither knew what the Administrative Procedures Act was. None of it. There were just two guys from Silicon Valley, two guys from Elon Musk's world who had a chatbot, ChatGPT, for example, and they had 6 weeks. And here's what they did with ChatGPT in one government department.
Yes. Through photos. I don't really know how Signal works. Through tech, like phone calls through Signal?
Yes.
Okay. FaceTimes? Is that?
I want to talk to you about potentially joining. So all of our communications were on Signal.
Okay. How did Mr. Armstrong tell you that?
In person.
In person. Okay. Were you sharing text messages with Mr. Armstrong before you downloaded Signal?
Yes.
Okay. Ever about DOGE?
No.
Did you search those texts to come to the understanding that you never texted him about DOGE?
I remember him being very focused on switching to Signal to talk about anything.
Requests that we've gone through from your subpoena?
They're all deleted automatically. That's the default setting in Signal.
Okay.
That's the default setting is in Signal. Now, what he's really saying there is that everything was kept off the books. You know, that is not the way things are done in government departments. Of course, there should be a record of absolutely everything they did. But from the very recruitment phase, from the moment he was recruited for DOGE, it was all on Signal. Every interview happened on Signal. Every big discussion happened on Signal. Any briefing of the bosses, including Elon Musk, all of it happened on Signal, which meant it is all deleted. There is simply no record of what they really did, except from what we could piece together through these depositions, and they are quite alarming. So we mentioned they arrived in March of 2025. By April 1st, $100 million in grants was gone. Just imagine $100 million of people's projects. These are not just numbers. These are people's work. You know, they are documentaries. They are other artistic endeavors. There any sort of recognition of artists' work a lot of it comes from grants. A lot of it comes from the government. That is just the way these things get funded. So imagine these two guys walking in and within a few weeks, eliminating $100 million in grants, people's works, people's projects that were in play, people's life's projects in some cases. You'll hear about some of these works that were done about the Holocaust or other events that were really meant a lot to the creators of those projects. But for these two, they didn't mean that much. They were just scores on a checklist. They also, by the way, eliminated 65% of the staff. So these two 28-year-olds walked in and fired 65% of a government agency. The agency's own people didn't even know that this grant cutting was taking place at the time. One of them emailed a grantee and said, "I'm terribly sorry to tell you that DOGE did indeed cancel your award. NEH staff, like myself, didn't realize it was happening." It's quite stunning. Now, we're going to listen to more of their deposition. We heard there about Signal. Signal was chosen. It was not incidental. It was deliberate. Everything happened on Signal. And when we now look at all the evidence we have to piece it together from these depositions. One of the things that Mr. Fox here did is create this really remarkable list. And I'll pull it up for you so you can see it as well. Look at this. This is a checklist on which Justin Fox over there decided to terminate or continue various grants to these awardees of the NEH. And you can see the words, pretty easy to see what kind of focus he had. LGBTQ, homosexual, tribal, immigrants, immigrant, diversity, inclusion, queer, transgender, non-binary, gender fluid, cisgender, bisexual, pansexual, asexual, multicultural, ethnicity, indigenous, native. And you just the first few there, clearly all just targeted at the LGBTQ community. And then it goes into these others, multicultural, ethnicity, indigenous, native, diaspora, refugees, migrants, asylum, and then more, equity, equality, intersectionality, privilege. Privilege made it there. It's quite a word for them to have chosen to include. Marginalized, oppressed, minorities, BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, allyship, solidarity, representation, tolerance, wow, pluralism, assimilation, integration, xenophobia, nationalism, borders, citizenship, undocumented, deportation, melting pot, cultural appropriation, social justice. And just because they may not have had all those words up at the top, they also said the word gay at the end. So quite a list that is very telling, very, very telling about who and what they were trying to achieve when they were at the National Endowment for the Humanities. So put yourself in that context then. They took this particular list and they fed it into, well, what else? ChatGPT. So now you've got this very new technology, very new AI doing the work for Justin Fox and his friend, Mr. Kavanaugh. You'll meet him in a minute. And they were the ones responsible for cutting all the costs, but it was actually ChatGPT, an AI, a very new kind of technology, which determined based on this list alone whether these grants should be approved or not. Let's listen to some more of Justin Fox's deposition.
Very well could have put heterosexual, but it is not on this list.
It's not on this list.
Don't know why I didn't put heterosexual, but it is not on this list.
Okay. Do you see white on this list?
I see privilege.
Do you see white on this list?
Could you scroll back up? No.
Okay. What about Caucasian? Was that on the list?
No.
Okay. So you can see that there's gay, LGBTQ+, homosexual on this list.
Yes.
Okay, but there's no heterosexual on this list, right?
Very well could have put heterosexual, although this list does not capture everything that is DEI. Again, this was a preliminary search.
Got it. And we can see that it says Black, Indigenous, people of color on this list, right?
Yes.
It doesn't say white or Caucasian on this list, does it?
It very well could have. Again, this is an early, before we had our meetings, and it all depends on the grant itself.
Did you ever correct that by putting white or Caucasian on any lists that you used to screen for DEI?
I didn't need to, because we read the grants themselves.
So you were using ChatGPT to screen grants using keywords, and that screening didn't have white, heterosexual, Caucasian on it. Is that fair?
Objection.
Race?
Objection.
No.
Did you do anything to ensure that ChatGPT's conception of DEI in this task that you gave to ChatGPT would strike that? Do you do anything to ensure that ChatGPT's perception of DEI as applied here wouldn't discriminate on the basis of sex?
Objection.
It didn't matter because, again, this was not the ultimate.
I'm asking you I'm entitled to an answer to my question as posed. I'm not asking you about Michael McDonald or Adam Wolfson. I'm not asking you about how many other iterative steps it took to the terminations. I'm asking this question. Did you do anything to ensure that ChatGPT's perception of DEI as applied here wouldn't discriminate on the basis of sex?
Objection.
There was no need to do that because
Did you do anything to ensure that ChatGPT's perception of DEI as applied wouldn't discriminate on the basis of religion?
Objection.
we did not need to do that.
So we did not need to do that, is what he thinks was his job. You know, it was okay to just ask ChatGPT to look through all the grant awardees at the National Endowment for the Humanities and to just use ChatGPT to determine whether they were pro-DEI or not DEI or whatever it was that they were deciding they were doing. And they could just eliminate anything was in the DEI bucket based on what ChatGPT thought. Now, everybody knows that AI is discriminatory in its basis. It's based on discrimination. That's on knowledge that was first acquired in a discrimination era. So the fact that they didn't even take into account any precautions, anything at all, to stop the ChatGPT from discriminating against certain races, certain sexual orientations, certain genders, is beyond the pale. It's not in this clip, but there's another point here where the lawyer asked why immigrant is on the list. And then Fox said, this is his actual description, if I recall it correctly, he said, it's not hamburger, it's something that may relate to cultural appropriation. Now, immigrants is what America is based on. I mean, that is American as apple pie. Certainly not hamburger, but it is American. And so it's remarkable that he chose to include that in a checklist for ChatGPT. Unbelievable, really. Then we get into the specifics, which is just as nauseating in some ways. The Colfax Massacre, April 13th, 1873 is the date, if you want to look it up. More than 100 black men murdered by a white supremacist mob in Louisiana after a disputed election. The Supreme Court's response effectively ended Reconstruction. A grant to document it was on the termination list because Justin Fox and his ChatGPT had determined it didn't quite qualify based on his list of criteria over there.
Or a specific race, here being black.
Why would learning about anti-black violence not be to the benefit of humankind?
Objection.
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay, then what are you saying?
I'm saying it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
You said it's not to the benefit of humankind, right?
Is that what I said?
Yeah. Could you read back the witness's response about benefits to humankind?
Question, why would that be DEI? Answer, it's focusing on a singular race. It is not for the benefit of humankind. It is focused on a specific group or a specific race, here being black.
So what do you mean by not for the benefit of humankind?
That's a very subjective. The way that I phrased it there wasn't exactly what I meant. It is focused on a specific subset of race, and therefore it relates to DEI.
Okay.
I'm not suggesting that this is not for the betterment of humankind. That was a misphrasing.
Okay, so is it your understanding that the actual massacre was an event of anti-black violence?
Objection.
What do you mean?
Like, I guess I'm trying to distinguish between the facts of the massacre itself, the historical event, versus how it's written here. There was, at least in the description here, a massacre that seems to have been in some ways anti-black or against black people. Is that your understanding of it by reading this?
Could you zoom in? Okay, what was the question?
Is it your understanding that the historical event itself, the Colfax Massacre, was an event featured anti-black violence?
What do you mean by featured?
That there was anti-black violence exercised during the Colfax massacre.
Yes.
Okay. And so you're not disputing whether this was a real event, are you?
No.
Okay. So if anti-Black violence was a real feature of a real historical event, what about this project is DEI?
Because it focuses on exclusively anti-Black violence, which is a race.
So because the massacreists at the Colfax massacre decided to kill only Black people, there should be no, this project should be marked for DEI and put on a potential list for termination.
He is a epitome of what you'd expect these days from the entitled white privilege out of the world of Silicon Valley or DOGE or any of those places. The reliance on ChatGPT says everything. But when you've got someone here who doesn't even know what DEI means, he doesn't even understand the events that he's taking the grants away from. So in this case, he doesn't understand the Colfax massacre, never knew what really happened, just relied on ChatGPT. And then the key point here that the lawyer was making there, of course, was this wasn't an anti-white massacre. It was an anti-Black massacre. If it was an anti-white massacre, it wouldn't have gotten the same kind of scrutiny. It would have been allowed through. But because it was anti-Black, well, then it's a problem for this man. It's a problem for his ChatGPT. It's a problem for Elon Musk. I mean, nothing could be more blatantly racist than that. And this was done. This is just one government department, a very small government department. We are learning about all sorts of things that were happening by DOGE in various departments. And we're all finding out through these lawsuits, these many, many lawsuits that are coming out. And each of them are private lawsuits. There's no government investigation. There's no congressional investigation. There's no even Department of Justice investigation, as there should be, into what happened with DOGE. All we have is private lawsuits. And these private lawsuits are revealing as these young guys running rampant through the system, in some cases stealing government data for their own companies to start later on. In other cases, implementing these fairly new technologies like AI to make decisions that normally would be reserved for very senior people in the government, and that they are wholly unqualified to do these jobs. I mean, they just aren't qualified to be anywhere near there, maybe as interns, but nothing really more. And then you get this read from them as you're watching this, and you realize that there is a kind of entitlement, which is amazing, really, to feel that someone in this day and age feels so entitled to absolutely everything, to the power that he was given. And by the way, $150,000 a year salary in the government to come in and burn people's lives down in terms of their dreams, in terms of their work, in terms of everything that these people had been working so hard to get these grants for, completely destroyed by two guys. Now, that's one guy. That's Justin Fox. Now meet Matt Kavanaugh. He's even more senior to Justin, by the way, in this case. And tellingly had sold his first of many, I didn't say it's $1 billion company because it was not, but it was a successful company that he'd sold. And this is that Peter Thiel acolyte who thought, well, I don't need to go to university. So he just dropped out of college, started making money in Silicon Valley, in creating all these companies. What emerges here is that missing of college was not the best idea.
You did reduce the deficit, right? But
Sorry?
You said you didn't reduce the deficit?
I think if you look at the net deficit from 2024 to 2025, I actually think it's close to a net zero, unfortunately.
Okay. So you weren't able to reduce the deficit, and you still don't regret that people sum of their livelihood based on your actions?
Objection.
No.
Okay. What authority?
No regrets at all from this guy. One of the things that he talks about is the speed at which DOGE operated. Before anyone even knew what was going on, these guys had swooped in and done a very Silicon Valley kind of thing. They broke everything, moved quickly, whatever that expression might have been that they initially used at Facebook. This is what these guys did. They didn't take time to analyze, to talk, to discuss what the right criteria is. They even forced the existing executives to move even faster than they were even remotely comfortable with, because they're telling them the administration directors in the organization, they were told by these DOGE employees that there was pressure to move quickly from the White House. There wasn't pressure from the White House to move quickly. That was these guys who came up with the directive claiming that the White House had forced them to move quickly.
To avoid government employees dragging their feet on cancellations.
Aside from that general goal, did you receive any specific instruction to
No.
execute this plan quickly?
No.
No. That?
March of 2025.
What did you do at the U.S. Institute of Peace?
We reduced the Institute of Peace to its statutory minimum.
What did that involve?
It involved terminating all of the existing contracts, grants, and firing all of the employees.
Okay. So you terminated all the existing contracts, grants, and fired all the employees at the U.S. Institute of Peace?
Objection. You can answer.
Effectively, yes.
What's the objection?
Form.
What's the objection?
Form.
Form in what sense?
Well, I mean, you're partially just repeating what he said, but then in a slightly different way.
Okay. What did you do after which agency did you work at after the U.S. Institute for Peace?
I don't recall.
So it sounds like essentially you were tasked with going to each of these agencies, terminating all grants, contracts, employees that weren't statutorily necessary.
Objection.
That was the case for agencies that were listed in an executive order where the White House stated through EO that they be reduced to statutory minimum, yes.
And which agencies do you recall that applied to?
I don't recall. It's the ones I gave you, plus there was a second executive order in March, I believe, which had another set of agencies.
But you also worked at agencies that weren't specifically referenced in an executive order.
That's right.
Right? And what was your task there?
That was not the same task. It was to meet with the heads of the agencies to evaluate personnel, contracts, and grants, but the mandate was not to reduce those agencies to statutory minimum. It was just to conduct a thorough review to make sure that all spending was appropriate given the broader mission of DOGE.
And how was that mandate conveyed to you?
It wasn't explicitly conveyed to me.
Wasn't implicitly conveyed to him. I mean, it's kind of stunning. You can't believe that this is actually happening. So DOGE gives him this assignment and to go to the U.S. Institute of Peace. You heard him there saying he was declared the director of the U.S. Institute for Peace, which was shut down. It's now the Trump Institute for Peace, if I'm not mistaken. Everything that the very, very laudable and independent Institute of Peace that pre-existed DOGE was terminated. And this was the guy who landed up being in charge of the building. He was the guy who was assigned this, I think, $500 million building to be under his control, while the federal government, while the executive completely eliminated everyone who worked in the Department of the Institute of Peace. And then they transferred it over back to the administration, I think, after that. So the kind of games they played to get these DOGE officials into different organizations that weren't even federally mandated. And then you heard him there talk about reviewing contracts, again, not federally mandated, is kind of stunning. But of course, there was no congressional oversight over this. This was done out of the Trump White House in order to achieve a $2 trillion deficit cut. But it did nothing. It did nothing. It didn't do anything close to that. In fact, I think the deficit went up, if I'm not mistaken. So these two 28-year-olds whose mission was to cut grants, to cut spending, wasteful spending, and jobs, didn't do a thing. Why? Well, they didn't achieve a thing because behind the scenes, that wasn't really the goal of DOGE. The goal of DOGE appears to have been to siphon the data out of the government to somewhere else. So while these guys were in there thinking they were doing Elon Musk's directive and whatever, there are allegations, some of them that look pretty solid on paper, that all this data was being siphoned up through Starlink, believe it or not, to a foreign government, perhaps Russia, to download. And there's some evidence of that. It's not foolproof, of course. Nothing's foolproof because nothing has been investigated. Nothing has really, from an official level, a Department of Justice level or congressional level, no one has looked into DOGE to find out whether the data that was taken from there has been moved to a foreign country or another intelligence service, or whether Elon Musk has it in his back pocket or on a hard drive somewhere. We know that all the data from the Social Security Department did land up leaving on a hard drive with one of these guys to start his new company. Let's listen to more of Matt Kavanaugh's testimony here. And I think this is the one where he talks about knowing that there was conflict between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And it's fascinating because the other names of the people in this meeting, this is the other side of who was in that meeting. Matt Kavanaugh talking about his meeting now, or hearing about his firsthand accounts of Trump and Elon Musk having tension.
I was not drawn to the immigration program personally. I didn't agree with all of it.
What didn't you agree with?
I had found the small agencies work more fulfilling because I originally joined DOGE to help reduce the federal deficit, and immigration was not directly related to that, so I wasn't interested in it.
Did you feel like the ICE work was too aggressively getting people deported, or not aggressively enough?
Objection.
I didn't think it was aggressive enough, but at the same time, I didn't enjoy working on that project.
So why did you go there in the first place?
The small agencies work.
Not because he had any problem necessarily with what they were doing. He thought that they should have been working faster, all this other stuff, but it just wasn't his kind of work. So he wanted to go back and work in the small client sector, whatever it was that he called it, what Palantir was doing with all this data. So that is absolutely correct, because in addition to siphoning off this content and data and sending it to Russia, one of the other things they were doing was creating a universal database, specifically for ICE, but for other departments as well, which would take all these previously siloed departments and create a single database for Palantir, the data company with huge connections to the Pentagon, to be able to see and hear and know basically everything there is to know about every American, because by cross-referencing each of these siloed databases, they're able to get a huge picture of absolutely everything that shouldn't be cross-referenced, but suddenly they were able to cross-reference. Imagine your health records cross-referenced with your criminal records, cross-referenced with your employment records, cross-referenced with your taxes and whatever else. Maybe if you combined all of those, who knows, you might be able to find all sorts of things about people that you didn't know before. And that is what Palantir can do now, because they now have a single database. Doesn't seem like these guys knew or acknowledged knowing that that's what they were doing. However, Matt's former company was involved in exactly that kind of database consolidation. So he might be lying here. He might be telling the truth, but he certainly had experience in that database connections or consolidation that they were doing at DOGE. Let's play that clip now about the West Wing tension with Elon Musk and Donald Trump.
Steve Davis, Howard Lutnick, and David Sachs in the West Wing of the White House, where there was a discussion about the growing tension of not being interested in cutting spending as aggressively as we'd originally hoped.
And who communicated that from the White House perspective?
Objection.
I don't recall.
Someone communicated it.
Objection.
I don't recall, honestly, who said it. Might have been Elon.
But it was said. Did you say anything at that meeting?
No,
Why were you invited to that meeting?
because I was a senior official within DOGE.
You mentioned Elon Musk. Did you ever talk to Elon Musk about NEH?
So he's invited to these meetings involving all the senior members in the cabinet there, including Lutnick, you heard David Sachs, I think was mentioned, the crypto czar, Elon Musk was mentioned. I'm not quite sure why the crypto czar is in the middle of this meeting. I'm not quite sure of why this meeting took place necessarily, with Elon Musk running the show, when frankly, he was just a consultant at the time, if you recall, not even a real cabinet member or anything like that, even though he was allowed to sit amongst the cabinet meetings. The fact that there was tension became very, very public knowledge, but we don't know very much else about what was going on in these meetings. We don't really have a record of them, and we don't know whether people like Elon Musk, who is an avowed South African supporter of apartheid, may have influenced some of these decisions. Was he a person who leaned in on Justin Fox earlier and said, anything related to supporting Black history or or Black stories. We want to make sure that those are not granted awards. Was he intimately involved in each of these questions, in each of these categories? Did he decide which grants were proven or not? Because while ChatGPT made the recommendations, it was ultimately people who shut down these different grants. So it would be really interesting if any time there is an investigation, or if the Congress actually decided to wake up and do an investigation, well, they might find some incredibly unique and telling evidence that we are going to lose over time if we don't start this investigation. And a good place to start are these depositions right here, because in these depositions, it looks to me like there's blatant discrimination. It looks to me like every official rule, including using Signal is not allowed to be used on American government devices, yet these guys were using Signal to transfer information back and forth all the time to Elon and David and everybody else that they needed to send information to. That's not legal. We know that's not legal. They know it's not legal. And they were making decisions about people's futures, careers, their work projects, their life works projects, and they were eliminating them at will based on ChatGPT, which is not a recognized way to determine any spending by any government department. So Congress needs to look at these depositions, and there are many more from different lawsuits that are taking place, and we'll be bringing you more of those over the next few weeks. They need to really understand what was going on inside DOGE. DOGE was much more than an attempt to cut spending that went awfully wrong. It was an attempt to cut spending that went awfully wrong, but also stole the data of Americans, broke government rules in order to do that, potentially copied and sent a lot of that data to our foreign adversaries, and perhaps, just perhaps, being a criminal conspiracy in order to give a single company, Palantir, got access, as they call it, to all the data in the US federal executive. And that will forever be in their hands. It's impossible to reverse engineer that. And if these guys were involved in that criminal conspiracy with Elon Musk and others, well, there should be criminal charges. It shouldn't be just left up to these private lawsuits. And that for that to be the only venue that we get to hear these stories. One last clip from Matt Kavanaugh then, as we end tonight's show. Let's take a listen to what he has to say here.
That with Mr. Robinson earlier?
I do.
Okay. Walk me through that process exactly.
There was a weekly scorecard, as it was called, where we reported on savings across each agency. It was black text in an Excel spreadsheet file. That was downloaded. Steve preferred that to be sent over Signal. Signal is not on a government device, so we downloaded it and sent it to Steve on Signal. Okay. That was the extent of.
So Mr. Davis was not on a government device?
I don't know if he was on a government device or not. I know he preferred to receive the scorecard on Signal.
Okay. Do you know whether Mr. Davis had a government email?
I believe he had an EOP email address that he did not use.
Okay. And you never communicated with him on that email address?
I'm sure I sent him an email or two, but it was incredibly infrequent.
So I understand sending Mr. Davis something off of email based on his request, but why did you email something to yourself first before sending it to Mr. Davis?
There was no other way to get the scorecard that we generated to Steve on Signal.
Okay. You can go directly from your government email to Signal?
Correct.
Why not?
I don't think GSA allowed the downloading of Signal, among many other apps.
Okay. So GSA didn't allow the downloading of Signal? Is that what you're saying?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. But you then sidestep that by sending documents to your personal phone so that you could then use Signal?
For the weekly scorecard, that was the process, yes.
And that didn't set any alarms about whether or not you should be using Signal to do government work? The fact that GSA didn't let you use
The
it?
communication platform when I joined, and that was just, when I joined, that was where I was told a lot of conversations were occurring.
Okay. Did you have an understanding of the reason that Signal in specific was used?
I didn't.
Do you think it was because of its auto-delete function?
Probably, yes, but I don't know for sure.
Okay.
Probably yes, but he doesn't know for sure. Of course he knows for sure. it kind of blows my mind where that this guy who supposedly is a tech genius couldn't figure out another way to get the scorecard, as he's talking about there, to Steve Davis or Elon Musk or whomever else needed to know it, except on Signal. So that is the reason they used an illegal app, Signal, to transfer information that was really important to the government, that was supposedly confidential and needed to be treated in the right way, into an encrypted app and a record that we could no longer follow of who got to see it, who was it passed to, did Elon Musk make decisions like that, who made the decisions to actually kill these programs ultimately, and what was the feedback up and down the line from these individuals to these operatives on the ground. Now, of course, none of these shouldn't be approved. They all seem like they're legitimate approvals too, but it's pretty obvious. It's pretty obvious why some were kept and others were not. And that is just blatant discrimination. There's no other way to look at these DOGE depositions and to look at the testimony here, but also at the evidence that this was an attempt to turn America into a apartheid state. And you might quibble with that description, but I'll tell you why, as someone who lived in South Africa, why it reminds me of apartheid, because the legislation was that specific in South Africa. You know, you were told there was funding for white people, funding for black people, and funding for colored people. And the funding was vastly different. Most of the funding went to white people and to their communities and to their services and to their storytelling, to the point where the vast majority of South Africans never got to have their stories told or celebrated or revealed to the general population, no matter how horrific. And some of them included some very horrific scenes where they were the victims of massacres. Just like the Colfax massacre was denied funding by these two DOGE officials. Well, that was very much what would happen in South Africa over and over and over again. So that's the story of the DOGE depositions. I thought it was just really interesting. I kept looking at these tapes and they came up and I was like, these are fascinating on the surface. I mean, they're really interesting to see their attitude. It's interesting to see their approach to the questioners, their sort of smugness, their ability to project this kind of, I'm better than you no matter what you ask, and I'm going to get away with this no matter what you ask. And the fact that these guys had no idea what they were doing or what they were talking about. I mean, these have, especially this Matt Kavanaugh has no college education. And if there's ever a poster child for why Peter Thiel's anti-college education drive is bullshit, well, there you go. You have it right there. This guy doesn't read any books, obviously, doesn't have a sense of the historical context of anything, thinks he knows everything and think he knows better. For me, he's 28 years alive on this planet, having never been able to compete against other students in a curriculum setting where you really get to know whether you know everything or you just know this tiny slice that you've been told you're good at all again and again in your life. And you can bet at your bottom dollar that guy has been told he's great at everything from the second he was born. No one is going to tell him otherwise, even when he's confronted with the very fact that they didn't save any money from this whole exercise. He still thinks he has no regrets. This was a worthwhile endeavor for him. I mean, it tells you everything you need to know about what's wrong with our current generational divide and why it's so nauseating that those are the people that become the billionaires right now. Because when you have limited education and then you get billions of dollars, you'll end up making very stupid decisions with that money, thinking that you can, force the world into change the world in whatever way they think that they're going to. And this is where we land up with the broligarchy. It's just exactly who has taken over America, who's supporting Donald Trump and who Donald Trump is peddling to time and time again. We have some people saying it's actually very scary. It is very scary because none of these people are qualified to make these kinds of decisions. This will go down in history in the worst way. It will go down in history as the worst thing. It's going to cost us way more, by the way, because by the time we're done all the legal lawsuits around this and we've had to make restitution for all these terrible government decisions, it's going to cost us a fortune because these are all potentially illegal. These are all potentially done without authority of the Congress. These are all people who were promised grants, who deserve their grants, and we're going to be paying for those grants and then some over and over and over again for the future. So it's just an exercise in waste of time, but an exercise in highlighting how Young people are not the answer to all our problems. Young people have a great place in our society, but they shouldn't be given the levers of power, as it were, because if they take the levers of power and they don't know what they're doing, you'll end up with the mess we have right now. We've been betrayed the way beyond measure, not just Americans, but also immigrants. Elon Musk, this administration has put forth, has made us worse off 100%. I mean, it's been a year. It's hard to imagine a year in America where more destruction, more personal dreams, more work product, whether it's science work product, whether it's any Department of National Health work product, whether it's the NEH work product here, how much work has been destroyed. And these people who are in these fields dedicate their lives to achieving some sort of success in these fields, not necessarily because they're after the money. The money is not really the thing. It's about telling the stories or about making the next scientific breakthrough or about helping society achieve something. And to think that these kinds of people, these two 28-year-old DOGE guys, marched in there thinking they know better, and to rip the workouts from all these grants, took the money away for these works, and then left these people's lives and their efforts probably shattered for a while, is just appalling. That's what happened with DOGE, and it's just been a year. People today were talking about how depressing all this news is. It is. It's really hard. It's actually really hard to report on. It gets to me all the time. And yet we got to keep at it, because if we don't keep at it, they will shut us down. They will shut down this knowledge like they tried to do with what they did at NEH. They are trying to remove any remnants of what real Black history is in the United States, or any number of other categories, LGBTQ, the struggle for women's rights. All these things they're trying to take that narrative away. They're ripping it out of the history books of our lives, and they're replacing it with this, literally whitewashed stuff. And they will do exactly the same with what they're doing now with the purchase of CBS News and CNN and all these other by Ellison. It is all an attempt to consolidate and then absolutely edit out parts of the American story that they don't like. They're going to retell the American narrative through their eyes, which is going to be obviously extremely patriotic in a kind of naive way, whitewashed, only the stories they want to tell, complete propaganda. And a lot of people are going to get those stories whether we like it or not. So that's why we're doing this. That's why I keep highlighting stories that are sometimes difficult to take. We're in a terrible period of time right now where there's just more and more and more negativity out there. It's going to keep getting worse probably until the elections. You've really got to steel yourself and keep up your support. This work is my life work. It's certainly a thing I've been doing for the last 10 years because I could see what was coming. I could tell what this Trump regime was going to be about, and I was extremely worried at how influenced they were by Russia. And all of that is sort of borne out, is real. We have to keep pushing. We have to keep making sure that everyone finds the truth. I am more and more convinced that truth is the answer to what this regime is about. The more we expose the truth, the more scared they become. We've seen what happened with Epstein. The more we exposed Epstein, the more it became an issue for them. Now, the government is in serious trouble with its supporters because of things like Epstein, because they weren't able to keep that story suppressed. It's so important that you support everyone here on Substack, who they are, this incredible group of people who are day in and day out working so hard to expose the stories that are the truth about this administration, whether it's Ellie Leonard or Lev Parnas or Dean Blundell, Ali from the Left Hook, or so many others that we feature on my show and elsewhere. Whoever it is, it doesn't matter who it is, just support them, because the truth needs to come out. It is the only thing, the absolute only thing that can expose what happened and expose this administration into some sort of dangerous territory at the elections, is if more and more people know about the terrible things that were done in government. They're going to find out now with Iran how terrible that has been, what a terrible decision that has been. They need to find out what happened with DOGE. We absolutely need to get to the bottom of the truth around Epstein. We have to find out the governments and the foreign influences and operatives that have control of this executive. We need to understand which corporations are being controlled by foreign governments that are working against the national security interests of America. I mean, when you think about it, it's never been an issue in America that a a government, a private company, was operating against the national security interests of the government, of the country. But we have that now. We have several companies that are owned by sovereign wealth funds or by foreign entities. And those companies are operating on a national security level against our best interests. And that is never been something that we've ever had to encounter. We've never had to think about traitorous corporations. We've declared corporation citizens. And now you've got foreign governments that are buying up those corporations in order to become those citizens and have this outweighed power that they have that is so dangerous to our world. And then they staff it up with these young kids who are 28 or whatever, and they get paid a fortune. So they get, arrogant, they get full of themselves, and they act like they know what's really going on when they have absolutely no idea. So these corporate takeovers by foreign funds, by foreign sovereign funds, by foreign governments that we see all the time because they're celebrated on the CNBC. Hey, $1 billion sale here, $1 billion sale here. Yeah, $1 billion is a great number, but that's not what they're buying. They're not just buying the company. They're buying the influence that that company has over society in general, over politics in general, over news production and news dissemination in general. That is the problem, is they see the value that they're buying, and it's legal for them to acquire all this influence. And then, who gets marched into the White House for meetings anytime they want? Any one of their CEOs gets to march in. Everyone can sit around the table. Everybody gets whatever they need for their corporations, because the CEOs are also run by the foreign governments that are supporting this government and this administration. So it's a very corrupt circle. You've got foreign governments who've installed a president. You've got corporations who are owned by foreign governments, and they're busy rewiring America for their own mutual benefit and to take away the resources and power of the people who really own America, which is you. You are the shareholders that are the American shareholders. Nobody else should be. These foreign governments have found the loophole through corporations and by installing a compromised regime to take over what is your birthright, America, and only yours. I mean, the beautiful thing about America is that it's government for the people, by the people, and it deserves to remain that way. That is the model the founders created. It has been completely corrupted over the years, and we have to fight back. And I think truth is the only thing we have that can really fight that back. We don't have the weapons to really rise up against this militant and militarized government. We don't have many of the other things that we really need in order to make a stand. We can't buy TV networks or anything like that for the billions of dollars, but we can use our voices and we can use our influence to share the truth. And that is what I do at Narativ. And it's why a lot of my colleagues here on Substack do it as well. We're here to make sure that the truth is exposed and that we break this corrupt stranglehold on our government, because it's high time that all of that ended. Thank you for being here tonight on another Narativ Live. Thank you for being here. This has been the DOGE depositions on Narativ Live. We'll see you again next time.